Dogwich Imsent Nogamach, Delusi Sarah Mizel, Gespegawagi Dlewe, Wigi Kawashikamich Nige. So, hi everyone, all my relations. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm from, well, my hometown's Listagush, but Gespegawagi is just the massive territory that it's located in. Currently, I'm in Kawashikamach, so it's northern Quebec, way up there, and I'm on a Naskapi territory. So I've been here since March of 2021, working as the addictions worker, social worker here at the Wellness Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Well done, Sarah. I'm so proud.
Thank you.
My name is April Dedam. I'm from Listagush, Quebec, which is in Geskabegawag territory. So I was born and raised here, but I've had a lot of experience, working outside of the community from Ottawa to Montreal to like parts of New Brunswick. I did 20 years within Child and Family Services. Primarily, those years were spent doing child protection under the Child Welfare Act. Currently, I am still a student and just kind of keeping my options open for a new adventure within social work.
Oh yeah, April.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, April. I think we might have someone interested in your resume.
Yes.
And others. I've actually been I guess approached by a couple of organizations that definitely can see me as an asset within their organization. So I'm just keeping my options open, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'll announce my exciting news as to where I'll be.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me to have this conversation. I feel it's really important to have it, and with your background and your education and your own personal experience, I feel that we can come to something. So perhaps we can start with your experience in child services and in your line of work, April. Like in your experience, you said that you've been working for a little bit more than 20 years, right? So the times changed a lot. Did you ever encounter uh, some child placement in like non-Indigenous families?
Okay. When I first started working here within the community, we did have a couple of placements that were outside of the community. However, we actually have a ordering council, an OIC, that had been created amongst our political leadership, where we don't allow any placements outside of the community unless it's with a family member. So we've been very fortunate that we don't necessarily work within outside of our territory. In the past, I would say almost 10 to 15 years, 98% of our placements are within community. That other 2%, it's usually because we have a family member that's living outside of the community. But we do not place children in homes that they are unfamiliar with, or that there's no family relation outside of the territory. So that's a big improvement, for us. And I understand that a lot of other First Nation communities, they don't have that prevalence of, homes within the community, but we've been very, very fortunate here in Listagush.
Well, Listagush, it's quite fair. it's a big community. It's about like 4,000 people, or well, a little bit more. So it's fairly big community. What about the communities, like per se, that like 800 people, like the smaller community?
That would be Sarah can probably speak a little bit to that. I have some knowledge with regards to, I believe they adapted the similar situation like with us for child placement, but Sarah might be able to speak more to that as that's where she worked.
Yeah, but it wasn't for child welfare, youth
Oh,
protection. Yeah, it was for mental health and then addictions. But I mean, I like in my experience in child welfare, um, I do remember I think it was like one or two places, but like the child was placed in a non-Indigenous home, but I think it like I know on some of the court orders it would be like they had to reconnect that child like to the culture. So like sometimes what they would do was like bring them to like our annual powwows just for them to like be back like in Listugush and like hear the drumming, see all the grass dancers and fancy shawl and jingle dress and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much like that experience. But from being in Listugush, like April said, because that's where I did work for like almost 5 years in child and family services. Um, the majority of children we would uh, try to place with family. So, and instead of removing them in the beginning, we have like a prevention service, Families First, that we would ask to kind of help out with the file. So they would be in there helping, the family, with whatever services that they need, instead of us removing the child, right away. So I think for us there, it's what's important was to keep the child within community and within family, and to try to help the other families with either um, family support or addictions or mental health, and to because trauma trickles down, especially with like intergenerational trauma. And so I think from an indigenized and social work is to be trauma informed. And so yeah, so using that approach, so acknowledging the awareness of trauma, establishing trust, with the family, building resiliency, like try to develop, a holistic care for the family,
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. So that's so far it's been my experience. And I mean, I have had, coworkers who have felt like almost defeated because of the system. And I mean, it's hard for us as Indigenous social workers because we have to have the ability to function and navigate in both the Western world
Right.
and our
Right.
Indigenous worldviews, and try to maintain that connection and identity. So, like for me, it's still like a learning process, and I know for others it's also learning as well. But I did my social work with St. Thomas University. So it was the Mi'kmaq Maliseet Bachelor of Social Work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate to, be able to have the holistic healing and like, I don't know, like just learning about culture and our ways of helping and the importance of culture and bringing them back. And right now I'm doing my master's with Wilfrid Laurier, and it's in the Indigenous field of study. So again, it's like, me jumping into this and making sure that, you know, my future clients, our future clients, is that, you know, we help them build their wellness again and build their spirit back. Because I think a lot of times with the Western types, you know, like taking the kids away or blaming the parents because they can't parent or for addictions, you know, when really it was their upbringing and it's not their fault. So yeah, I think it's just important to be able to educate like not only like other social workers, but like non-Indigenous social workers who work in like an Aboriginal.
You are raising like a real good question here, because well, there's a you have to be like culturally sensitive and aware of the trauma, and um, it's not a tick the box situation, right? I know a friend of mine worked as a social worker, and she told me that, you know, there were lists that, you know, she had to check for certain things. She was like on a emergency calls, emergency team, and there were certain things that she had to check, and she's Indigenous, right? And it for the removal of the child, and it's just like some of the component were just like unrealistic to the reality of Indigenous people. It does not take in account like the trauma. It does not take like there's so much more. So do you feel that this system is not fit for Indigenous communities?
Most definitely. We have a system that is basically designed to fail Indigenous communities. Because if we look at a realistic approach, especially like within, you know, our communities here, access to professional services. Sometimes we have waiting lists that are a year to 2 years long. So if you're intervening with a family on an emergency level and they have this checkpoint or checkbox that we have to check off, it can turn into like months into years very quickly because they don't have the access to all the professional services that they need. And again, the language barrier comes in, you know, because we are Anglophones and our first language is Mi'kmaq. 95% of the services within our region are all Francophone, with very little Anglophone services. So that plays a big role in those criterias of those components. Um, how I personally worked through that is build in relationships, where I've built healthy relationships with the non-indigenized professional services, but also within the framework of centre jeunesse. And a lot of the times, you know, it's not our first instinct to go in, you know, and to remove a child. Our first instinct is to go in and, from my perspective, is how can I help you? What can I do to support you? Um,
And by helping you, it's not just the child, but it's the actual family unit,
as a
because
whole,
it's not just the children or the child. It's, you know, it's the result of
the
other
environment.
things. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
everybody within the environment of that child
Mm-hmm.
is
Right.
we aim to, you know, be successful. And in our community, there are many components, you know, of family. And I believe this for all First Nations. We are not just a one system family component where it's a mom and a dad, you know, and a brother and a sister. We have aunties, we have uncles, we have friends, we have cousins, we have grandparents that all play significant roles in raising families. And it kind of stands behind the whole slogan of it takes a community to raise a child, because it does. We all need to rely on so many whether it be professional services, whether it be like just in-kind services, or just other friends and family coming together to, help this family. I really believe that we need to start adopting wraparound services. So we're not just going in and doing a removal and, checking off all those components as we go. It's about bringing to the table a whole wraparound, like what can we do as a nation, as a community, as a worker to support this family to ensure that one, this doesn't happen again, and two, we're not, making them a part of a system that has failed us for so many years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sarah, working like in a remote community, what would be like the parallel that you can make, because now you're like working on in a smaller community opposed to Ristigouche being like a
A
bigger
bigger
community. Yeah.
one. It's, it's hard. Like because there are some, clients that I have interacted with, but a lot are usually placed off reserve because this is a small reserve, and they do lack um, foster homes. So for them, that's a huge thing. And with the Naskapi, like Kawashikamatch is the only Naskapi nation. So when they're placed elsewhere, how like that child loses their connection to the land and also to the language, because in, the next community over is Innu and French. So, how it's hard to kind of like, I wouldn't say like reconnect them because, they're located fairly close together. But I think it's just being in a remote area has its, deficits, I guess. Especially when they don't have their, Indigenous social workers, because the majority, or all, I should say, are like non-Indigenous.
And sometimes in northern communities, their children will get placed like 12 hours away, sometimes like even this within the city of Montreal. I know that's been a concern that has been growing for many, many years within the northern communities, that when child protection is involved, it's almost like a complete alienness of the child and its natural family, because it's taken from its environment in the north, and then brought to like a big city of Montreal.
And
Concrete
sometimes there are
walls.
families, because a lot, like some family have, like, let's say moved to, Quebec City. So the child will be like, if it was taken, like there are people, a lot of people who would live in Quebec City, but still, even though they're with family, that's great because they do have the option to come here. But when they are there, schooling will be in French unless, the family speaks the native language, then they'll be able to learn that way. So it's sometimes it has its
Well,
difficulties.
it creates a fracture in the culture and in the communities, and also for the children. Being a 60 scoop, I know about that fracture. But like you mentioned that there were a lot of I want to circle back to the non-Indigenous social workers. And I guess, well, in the community up north, is there any services? What I'm trying to say, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna gather my thoughts. Is there any services in your community that would uh, need more of a, this cultural sensitivity that we mentioned earlier?
Mm, No, it's usually because no, I mean it's on this reserve they have a CLSC, and there are NSCAPI workers in there, but as for like psychotherapists or social workers or youth protection workers, they're mostly all non-Indigenous.
So in our community, we don't have that type of service where if we have a non-Indigenous worker coming into our community, it's basically they're coming in and they're just like thrown right into their position. I've always been a strong advocate in the importance of cultural sensitivity, that even if you're Indigenous, let's say from like Mohawk Nation and coming to work in Mi'kmaq Nation, even though we're Indigenous, our communities completely have different realities. And I always feel that those programs should be offered, because it gives you an understanding of the trauma or the impacts of where a family's coming from when you have to intervene.
Mhm.
Also, and like another important factor is that, um, for Indigenous social workers, we have like that sense of belonging, that sense of ownership and pride within our professionalism, because we truly, you know, care for what is happening to our Indigenous families. But at the end of the day, when you have a non-Indigenous indigenized social worker working within your community, they leave at 4:30. So they can easily shut
Right.
off everything that they've done throughout the
Hmm.
day and go home to their, territory and be like, "Oof, that was my day." But when you are Indigenous, it's very difficult to turn that feeling off when you go home, because we've been a witness and a part of all the systematic racism, throughout the years, where it's like a continued cycle. And sometimes, as hard as we try to be better and do better, we're working against a system or within a system that was designated to fail us. So
Right.
it's so important to have, that aspect of cultural sensitivity training within any organization.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, or have talked about it often. Um, like to have something up here for it, and it's always talked about, but nothing, is put in place.
There's no
And
action. A lot of talk, no
yeah,
action.
and
Hmm.
I find like even, as Indigenous social worker, and knowing and working like with non-Indigenous social workers, sometimes there's like we butt heads
Conflict.
because of
Yeah.
different values, because of you know of our, I don't know, I don't, I want to say experiences. Obviously non-Indigenous have trauma as well, but when it comes to social work and like working with the family, having that mindset, like especially with addictions, let's say, like it takes time to work with someone to who is heavy in either drinking or doing drugs, right? And to try to like help them wean them off isn't like, well, they have a month to do it, or they have 2 months to do it, or
Yeah.
3 months while
Hmm.
they're doing their evaluation. Like
Hmm.
that doesn't happen.
No.
And I find that gets me so like so angry.
Absolutely.
And but I
Absolutely.
I know, like I know there's timelines that people have to respect, but when it comes to healing, it doesn't happen like that.
No,
So
you can't put pressure on that. You can't.
no, exactly.
Right.
And just like like for from me, like sometimes it like one time it took me like 8 months to get someone who was heavy into using to be like using like less or a couple times a week. But the person was like showering, and they were like going out more and a little happy and attending, so it takes a while. And I find with like the system, it doesn't allow them that time to heal.
Yeah. And not only that, I just want to go back to the timeline that Sarah had mentioned. the timelines, with the new articles that had changed back in 2012, um, was a whole creation of residential schools and the 60 scoop dilemma. Because a family that is put under a court order measure, if the child is less than 2 years old, or sorry, less than 4 years old, they have only 2 years to make a difference, to make those changes. And in the event that within the 2-year time frame, they didn't get those changes or make them, then the child, is either age of majority or up for adoption. And it's not taken into consideration the challenges that, Indigenous communities face, because trust is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't trust the system. We
Mm-hmm.
don't trust the non-Indigenous workers that are coming in. We don't trust, what they're putting out for us. And as an Indigenous social worker, um, even at that, we still have to build that foundation of trust with them. And that takes time because of all the trauma that, they've been encountered to. So those timelines are really, you know, not in the best interest of our members.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel that it's a very it's a colonial system. Excuse me. It's a colonial system in a way that, oh, we have ID action, ID action, ID action, and it doesn't allow the actual body, mind, and soul to recover. It's not like people are not projects, healing is long. It takes a lot, and it's not something that happens overnight. And I feel that well, I feel that there's like this conflict comes from that, it's it's two different rhythm of life, completely different. So, I was you were talking and I was thinking about would like obviously indigenous culture has like a lot to do, like it's mandatory in social work. Would it be like crazy to dream of like parallel working? Obviously, and the point is not to get rid of, the non-indigenous people. It's not like that. I'm not saying that, but perhaps like they would have definitely some learning to do, cultural safety training, cultural awareness, and like this cultural humility also, because some people might, oh, I work with indigenous with that will be edited. I work with an indigenous community, so I know it all. Not quite, not quite. It's not like that, so you there's this cultural humility also. um so would it be like crazy to think that one day we could work like in parallel and say we in every like nature what am I saying? Every every nation, we have our own system to take care of the family, to take care of the children, and this is how we work as a nation. And with sovereignty in like the communities, and say, well, yes, we can work in parallel with social worker, non-indigenous social worker. So would that be like, is it like so far-fetched of a dream?
No,
No.
because I know some non-Indigenous social workers who really care,
Mm-hmm.
and not that, a lot of non-Indigenous don't care, but they realize intergenerational trauma, and they want the best for, for their clients. So, I mean, even, with like I was explaining before, like there's like the Western way that we, in schooling, a lot of the times, like, we still learn about the Western culture and theories and methods and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also the Indigenous part. And I think, like, carefully, we still can, like, intertwine those two, right? And so someone can still do ceremony and be, go to a sweat and be able to, like, um, like pray and like to the creator and pray for
Mm-hmm.
their healing, but they can still go to, let's say, like, counseling, like to also help with their, mental health. So I think in some ways we can still work together that way.
I
Right.
believe
It would just be like the plan would just have to be individualized with the family or individual, because it will be different. One might want just the traditional holistic healing, and one might want, the Western, which has happened. Because a lot, even I find now, like a lot of people are into like the church, like Catholic, or I think here is Protestant, and so, or Anglican, sorry. So I think it's like every case is going to be different, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
all in all. But I think for me, we could work together, but I think it just depends on the client's needs and wants and how they want to, be guided in their healing.
they definitely do have the opportunity to work alongside each other, because when you look at, Western medicine and like traditional medicine, a lot of it can be intertwined, or accommodating to how can we complement each. And I believe that we can learn a lot from each other if we are working with each other. I mean, look at, for example, like Cindy Blackstock, from where she started to where she is now, and how many mainstream systems are working within the pedology of like Jordan's principle. Then we also have like the AFNQL, who has put a lot of effort into ensuring the First Nation communities within Quebec um, are well aware of what is happening within the mainstream understanding of the Child Welfare Act. And when there's new changes made to the Child Welfare Act, we have the commission at a provincial level that is always negotiating for what is in the best interest of Indigenous communities. So, and they've had made a lot of progress, and they have made significant contributions to, the federal government, where Indigenous communities are sought out or looked at from a different lens, like from a more of a traditional lens or an indigenized lens when it comes to working with our families, especially with, the new changes about the time frames that we were talking about. They were able to negotiate longer time frames, or to have that sensitivity to time frames within Indigenous communities based
Mm.
on numerous factors of language barriers, professional services, things like that. So I am hopeful, that one day we will see more of an Indigenous approach within a lot of our services, because I feel that getting back to the grassroots of who we are as an Indigenous nation is, very important, and very pivotal in our healing journeys.
That actually resonate a lot with me. It does. And yeah, because like personally, I combine like the two. I have like, I have Western medicine doctor that take cares of my health, but I see an elder, and I reconnected, with my culture, and I do like some ceremonies, even though like I'm not, in my community, but I'm here, and like it's yeah, it's a mix of both, and I'm healing through that process, right? So I feel like, yeah, collaboration is important, and to have like a safe space to be uh indigenous. Right?
And sometimes it's just, that heartbeat of the drum, or
Oh,
sometimes it's just the aroma of the
Very true.
medicines. It just gives that significance to our purpose, to our identity. This is almost like why I'm here and present at this moment, and what do we need to further do to, get on that um motivational track of healing, and it's just it's so powerful. And it's very difficult for a non-Indigenous person to understand, what that beat of the drum means, or what the
mhm,
smell of our medicines mean to
mhm.
us, and what it does to us as an indigenized person. Like it just overall, it brings so much warmth and just comfort. And it may be a simplicity to a non-Indigenous worker, like they're just banging a drum. Well, for us,
No.
more than that. It's the ceremony, it's the song, it's the beat. It encompasses our overall spirit. So it's just that's a bit, something big for
Mhm.
this lens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Woo!
wow. Well,
Uh,
thank
thank
you very much for your contribution. That was a lovely, lovely discussion.
hmm Thank you for having us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was
Really,
fun.
So thank you very much for joining me and having this conversation. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope our viewers did too. So stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
up the multis.
Optimal test.